Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. This week's guest in the theater is Karin Bronlewee. Karin was a classmate in my grad program, is now a therapist, and will always be one of the nicest, most caring, and genuine people walking the earth. This week, Karin and I are talking about the movie Terms of Endearment. It was released in 1983 and was nominated for 11 Oscars. Out of those 11, it won a measly 5 statues for Best Picture, Best Lead Actress for Shirley MacLaine, Best Supporting Actor for Jack Nicholson, Best Director for James L. Brooks, and Best Adapted Screenplay. This is one that, before preparing for the episode, I had heard a lot about, but never seen. So, just in case you want to see the movie before you listen to the episode, now's the time to pause, go to the Red Box, and join us again after, because spoilers are a-coming. Stay tuned toward the end of our discussion on the movie, because Karin and I are answering a question that one of you wrote in, which means that a future guest and I can also answer your question as well. Do you have a question you'd like to ask a therapist about relationships or mental health? Or have you seen something about a relationship or a mental health issue in a movie that you'd like to ask about? Well, send your question to therapisttheater@gmail.com. Anything else? Nope. No, I think we covered everything. So without further delay, let's go ahead and dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. So much for being here. Well, I guess for me being here, because this is your place. So thank you so much for being here when I got here, but also inviting me.
I'm happy to have you here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that it was so tricky to find it and you had to drive around.
I'll say this. I am directionally impaired as well. I've been in this town for 3.5 years, something like that. Still use maps to get
Did you say 30 and a half?
No, 3.5.
Okay, because I'm like,
yeah,
that doesn't seem right from the story, from your, what I know about your life.
Yeah, I got enough years in the tank to have done that, but I didn't do that.
Okay. So 3.5 years.
3.5, yeah, and I still use maps to get everywhere. Like, Leigh-Ann can go a place once, and she's got it in the tank. Like, she's got it locked in, but especially if I go there at first at night, I am just, I don't know.
Yeah, well, these days you don't really have to, you're not forced to do that because
you don't have to remember.
You've got tools.
Yeah. Yeah, so directions are not something that I hold against people because I can't do them anyway. Yeah, so I'm so glad that we get to do this. And I like to start off every conversation with just the question, why therapy? Why did you get into this this thing that we do? Okay.
Well, that question always kind of makes me nervous because it's how I felt when I was a young teen Christian kid at camp and people would tell their testimonies. And I didn't have nothing exciting.
Yeah.
I didn't have I had no drug addiction. You know, I nothing that I had to get saved out of other than my sin. But, you know, it didn't seem very big
other than that
important at the time. So when I think about why therapy, I don't have like this story of this amazing way that therapy brought me from out of hell. It's more a story of what next. It's like a midlife, what's next story. So I have been married for almost 25 years, which is really crazy to think of.
We have about 1.5 years, so I feel like we've got the same level here.
It's similar. It's very similar. And I was a stay-at-home mom for many years. So when I have 3 kids, and when my daughter so it's boy, girl. My daughter was like in 3rd, 4th grade. I'd been a stay-at-home mom of kids who are full-time in school for quite a while. So it was like, well, is this okay? Is this like a legit way to spend my time?
So
Now,
is that at some point that just becomes you're staying home by yourself?
right. And while I could fill that time up very easily and did, because I would volunteer in their classes and, whatever. I'd be cleaning the house. I'd be running errands, blah, blah, blah. It just felt like I would have a lot of anxiety about, when you meet new people, what do you do? And really at different times all the way through being a stay-at-home mom, I would have a little bit of that, because you get that response. It's kind of like, oh yeah, oh, that's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, that's such a worthwhile thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, do you really mean that? But it feels a little condescending, or patronizing.
Had you always...
Patronizing,
I
not
guess
patriotizing.
God bless America. I guess it's impossible to have always been a stay-at-home mom, but, before you had kids, what were you doing?
Well, see, I think that maybe is the root of it, because when I first graduated from college, got married that summer, and had my degree in secondary English education. And I taught for 1 year at this high school in Tampico, Illinois, birthplace of Ronald Reagan. Little known fact. Wow. Population of maybe 300. And they pulled in from the surrounding countryside. So 90 some students in the whole high school. And the standards were very low academically. And it was kind of a good old boyish kind of a vibe. This is in like northwestern Illinois, is where this kind of close-ish to the Quad Cities.
Oh, I don't know
area.
What the Quad Cities are.
Quad Cities are on either side of the Mississippi River. 2 of them are in Iowa, 2 of them are in Illinois.
Oh.
Rock Island, Moline, Davenport.
Is it one of those places where you can stand in 4 towns at once or something?
No, because maybe if you're in the river.
Oh.
I don't know.
Okay. Somebody's tried that.
Probably. Maybe if you're on a boat, you can. So anyway, I'm really digressing here, but so that it was not a great experience. It was like a really heavy workload, not much support, first year out of the gate. And then my husband started thinking about coming to Nashville for music.
Okay.
So we went through that. And when I got to town, I did a little half-hearted job searching. Then we thought we were long story, we thought we were going to move to Memphis for a while. So I kind of
also
stopped.
For music, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. My husband was working with an artist at the time who we had gone to college with, and she was possibly going to sign at a record label that was in Memphis. So we'd been there a couple times for her to record, and then so we're like, oh, maybe we're moving to Memphis. So why am I going to try really hard to get a job? So then I worked like rando jobs for a little while, and like the worst one was my husband and I both did telemarketing for several months.
Yeah.
It was so terrible.
I did it for a week in college for the admissions department.
Okay.
So you were like calling high school students to be like, hey.
I did that in college also.
And after a week, I was like, I'm out. I can't. Cold calling people. Blue.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So this was a lot of the time we were calling people to tell them, like, congratulations, you have been pre-approved for a Discover card.
Ooh.
And so it was horrible and mind-numbing. And so we were driving together. So one day we were on our way in, and we were just both so low and just like hating life. And one of us was like, what's the worst thing that happens if we just don't go in? Like, we'll figure something else out. And so we just didn't. We just turned around. I think we drove to Gatlinburg for the day. Just like had a fun day. And then, gosh, so mature. So then when we came home, we kept dodging calls from Bert, who was our supervisor. And finally one time he just left a message. He's like, guys, just come in and pick up your last paycheck. So anyway, something, to make our parents proud there, that behavior. So then we just did various, odd part-time jobs and stuff while he was getting into music and stuff. So then that tied me over till when I was 26 when my first son was born, George. And so then I was like, okay, this is my purpose. I always knew I wanted to stay home when I had little kids, and that felt valid and acceptable in the eyes of the people that I wanted to think I was doing the right thing, I guess, that mattered to me. But yeah, so then as they're getting older and I'm like, like would I want to have a career? Would I ever want to do another thing that's like really a thing? Or do I want to work part-time at Hallmark, and be nice to people and help them pick out their ornaments at Christmas? I'm like, I could do that. The funny thing is the two like divergent paths that I really pondered on, one was being a hairstylist and the other was therapy. I just started thinking about like, what do I like? What I feel like is like comes naturally and easily to me. And I've always been my relationships, my friendships, maintaining friendships over long periods of time has always been really important to me.
So connection is just super important to you.
Yes.
Like real connection though.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Super important. My family, making sure that I maintain that. If there's issues, like it wrecks me, So I was talking to my sister-in-law, actually Emily, whose office is around the corner from here. And I said, she was telling me she was thinking about going to school to become a therapist. And I said, you know what, this is really weird. And I feel like I'm just like jumping on your bandwagon or stealing your thunder. That thought has occurred to me too. And we both kind of were like, yeah, I can see that about you. That makes sense to me about you, vice versa. And she said, why don't you go to therapy and like start talking about that? I'm like,
try it out.
That's a novel idea. So I did. And I went to her name's Karin Bronlewee. She practices here in town. And it was actually in this building downstairs. And so just like started hashing out, like this is where I am. This is what I'm thinking about. This is a thought I've had. And then of course I was like, and then let's just get into whatever is my stuff, So I would bring in whatever was happening that week or hard. And then I'm like, do what you do, like do your thing. So we got into, family of origin, and it was just so cool. I loved it. I loved just putting myself kind of in her hands. I trusted her, and I learned a lot. And so it just kind of was building this maybe. And then I'm very much with my faith. Like I haven't heard the voice of God ever. So how I kind of sense God's, talking to me or trying to communicate with me is often just like if I hear the same thing a lot of times from a lot of places, or I'm a lot like, Lord, I'm just going to go do this direction. Could you please close a door if I'm like heading in a really bad. So that was kind of my prayer. Like, okay, I guess I'll start walking towards this thing. What do you do?
Here's what I like about it so far is you started by saying that connection was something that's really important to you. Yeah. And it's just showing up at every part of the story. So it's just this constant validation and affirmation that it's a part of your journey.
Right.
Because just even in the process of deciding, you ran it by, all the people that are important to you. What do you think about this? You even tried on the hat for a bit. Not tried on the hat, but like you went to a therapist to engage in, which is definitely something that I feel like should be a requirement. Right. As a part of the program. Like there were a few people that we were in it with that I found out had never seen a therapist. And I just thought, oh, this is such an interesting thing to do if you have never been on the couch. Right. I would have a tough time understanding how the passion would get birthed in you if you never sat on the couch. just because I mean, for me, it just feels like I was given a gift. And so I want to give that gift to other people.
Right.
Like I received healing and hope from it. And so I want to pass that, pay that forward. And so to not have experienced that would be something I just, oh, you must be that magical unicorn that didn't come out broken. And you started whole and you want to help people.
Right.
You know,
yeah,
that's where I would assume.
Yeah, have a framework to do that
Yeah.
if you never felt you needed it.
Yeah.
So I, took the test. I applied. I did all the stuff, and all the doors stayed open, and nobody came along and was like, "What? What are you thinking?" So I was kind of like, "Here I go," So yeah, I just kind of kept going. I'm still keeping going.
Just keep swimming.
And I just keep going, okay, I'm doing this thing. And the thing is that thankfully at this point, what I am starting to feel is that the more I've done it, the more confidence I have, which makes me feel less anxious about it, which is a good thing. Because not that I'm like, oh, so now I've got it all together at all. But
I don't know if you ever get there, though.
I guess you probably shouldn't.
And to a certain extent, I kind of hope you don't. Because I feel like, for me personally, as soon as I think that I've got it down, then I lose the humility that helps me connect with the person in front of me. Because if I'm thinking I got it down, then I'm starting by thinking, oh, I've got the answer that they need.
Right.
Rather than being humble enough to think, this is a person in front of me who provides a unique opportunity for me to get to know them. And I think in that case, it's a difference between like walking beside somebody and like sitting above them.
Yes.
And I'm afraid that if I ever think that I've got it together, that I'll start sitting above them, which it's tough to help people from that position.
Yeah. Who wants to hang out with that person?
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah.
I love I'm going to keep walking forward. I'm going to keep moving until I see some closed doors. So I mean, I know a little bit about you from sitting in the same classroom with you. I know that you love EFT. I know that you interned with Kenny.
Right.
What was it that made you gravitate towards couples and EFT and...
Well, the funny thing, like I said, I mentioned my mentor ahead in the program. So she was graduated by the time I entered, I think. But so she was like, yeah, this is where I did my internship with Kenny Sanderfer. And she explained, he does this EFT, emotionally focused therapy. And he's just a really sweet man, like really wise. And this is how I got my internship. So I went to the externship, that 4-day deal.
I did it.
Okay. The
I think you came in and sat in some of the ones that I was in.
I might
just
have.
Or you might have been helping register or something like that.
Something, yeah. So I guess that's my nature. Like if I'm like, you seem like you're doing something well, I've got to explore all the options and make sure I've got the right one. I'm like, is that working? I'll do that too. So when I got in class and heard about attachment, which was probably I think it was in the very first class, I'm like, oh, attachment. Like, oh my goodness. Okay, this is big. I love this. This is so important. This makes so much sense. So I was jiving with that, and then, so then sure enough, I'm like, okay, I'm going to that externship. She said, I went over and I introduced myself to Kenny and I told him I would like to be an intern with you guys. And he told me, go talk to Chanel, his assistant. So I was like, okay. So I went to the externship on the last day. I walked down to the front, introduced myself to Kenny, and said, I would like to do my internship with you all. And he said, all right, go talk to Chanel. So I'm like, great. Okay. So that was my path. I was just like, okay. And when I went to the externship again, I was like, yes, this makes sense to me. This seems really powerful, this way of working, especially with couples. They have, the live sessions. We're just like, oh my gosh, I'm weeping there in my seats watching things get challenged or, movement happen for couples, helping them get unstuck and see each other in a new way and have compassion for each other in places that were, where they would fight. It was just so cool and so so moving. So I'm like, yeah, I'm in. So I kind of hopped on the track, but then the track kept making sense and feeling right, you know?
Yeah.
So then, so when it was time to do my practicum internship, I was there at Marriage and Family Institute, and it was full EFT land, which
Were there any individuals that came through there, or was it just all couples?
lots of individuals.
Oh.
Yeah. And honestly, still to this day, I get a little lost with EFT and individuals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you hang out in those emotional responses and the way your body responds, and you try to help people tune into that so that you can, maybe if you have this certain thing that always triggers, this person at work, for example, who just gets on your last nerve, where you would be like, you just slow it way down, you zoom way in, what's happening when you catch them in the corner of your eye. Here they come, oh, my stomach, I get a pit in my stomach. And, and then, okay, what do you do? What else could you do with that? Like, where can you go with that anxiety? Looking for safe connections where they can turn to with stuff like that. But it still feels a little like nebulous, a little unclear. And so I when I work with individuals, I feel like I pull from a few different, more eclectic.
Integrative.
And then with couples, you have that framework, and they're both sitting here, and you can visualize it. It's like you can see the cycle, it's just almost palpable in the room. And so I try to stick really close to EFT when I work with couples.
Leading into the movie
Yes.
that you chose. So when I wrote you and said, do you want to do this? And then asked you what you wanted to do, you threw this one out. What movie did you pick for us to?
It's Terms of Endearment.
Terms of Endearment.
Starring Deborah Winger and Shirley MacLaine.
Yep.
Jeff Daniels and Jack Nicholson.
Yes. And came out in 83, won Best Picture in 84.
Okay.
Shirley MacLaine got Best Actress. Jack Nicholson got Best Supporting Actor. James L. Brooks got Best Director and Best Screenplay. So it won 5 Oscars.
Wow.
And
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I knew it had won a bunch, but I didn't know which
IMDb
ones.
told me when I was watching it last night.
Okay, got you.
I have to say, you
had not seen it before,
I had
right?
never seen it before.
Had you heard of it?
I'd heard of it, but
Okay.
I'd heard of it because it's one of these movies where every time I heard about it, it was like in reference to it being a crier.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're going to watch this movie, you're going to cry your eyes out. And so I got to make sure I do this. This is something I've gotten a little bit of feedback on.
Okay.
Please, if you're listening to this, know, if you have not seen the movie, you're entering into spoiler territory. And so if you'd like to watch the movie without knowing anything about it, this is the part where you pause the podcast and go watch the movie and then come back to us when you're done. I just kind of always figured that if you're listening to something like this, it's going to be spoilers, but I guess not.
Yeah, like we're not talking about it as to necessary. Although I would recommend it, but that's not what this is about.
So I knew it was going to be kind of like a crier, but I didn't really know anything about it. And I even said to Leigh-Ann before we started watching it, pretty sure this is about a mother and a daughter, and the daughter ends up dying before the mother, and it's really sad. And then as we started watching it, I was like, no, that I'm not picking up on that. That must not be this movie. And then it got to the end, and I was like, oh.
That is what's going to happen.
That is what's going to happen. Yeah. Jeff Daniels is a little baby in it. Like, he looks so young.
Yes. I think it was one of his first couple movies, because I just heard him interviewed on another podcast somewhere. And I think that was one of his first movie roles.
And what's with his name? Flap?
I know.
What
it's
is that?
So funny.
Is it short or for something, or?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It is. I noted that too, because I was trying to, when I knew I was going to watch it again, I was like, what was his name? And I kept thinking, Flack?
Yeah.
Like, what is it? It's something really weird, but yeah.
And inevitably when we get done watching it, Leigh-Ann always turns to me and goes, so what are your thoughts? And with this one at the end, the first thing that I said was, this movie is so different than anything that's being made today. I don't have a framework to compare it to anything. And I think I said to her, it feels like there's not a solid plot line or conflict that goes throughout the whole movie that gets resolved in a traditional storytelling sense. Like there's not a call to action of a hero and then trials to overcome and then they enter back into the same place but they're changed. There's nothing like that. It's more of a character piece. Like it's more like there's no plot that the character is in service of. The loose plot that there is in service of, let's get these characters together and have them interact.
Yeah.
So it's a movie that's more about the relationships than it is about a solid, like, plot line story that gets resolved and goes through the whole thing.
Right. I agree.
And I think that, and then she said, do you think that you're feeling that it's so different is because, and she said, when did you like really start watching movies and getting into them? And I was like, oh, probably like early 90s. Because I was born in 1980. So like, 88, 89, 90, somewhere in there. And so all the movies that I grew up like watching before I started going back and watching older movies were, the ones that early 90s stuff. So this being early 80s, it was just so different. If you had to sum up the story,
okay,
how could you sum up the story?
Well, you're right. Like it all centers around various relationships. And the central one is between the mother and daughter. Aurora and Emma. Aurora's the mom and Emma. And they're kind of very close, might say enmeshed.
I did think that.
To use the therapeutic term. In some ways beautiful, in some ways messed up relationship. And then kind of the arc from when Emma's a baby, just that one little scene, and you jump ahead to the day of her dad's funeral.
And for the first maybe 10 minutes of the movie, if you look away, it skips ahead 5 years.
Right, it just keeps skipping ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you get just these little vignettes, these little snapshots. And then so you're following Emma through getting married, moving away with her husband. Or
did she move? It looked like they live in a tree house at the beginning, but right. I think it's an above
the garage apartment. So
yeah.
That's not away. But then later they do move away, and through to her finding out he's having an affair, having her own affair, finding out she has cancer, and not too long after that, dying. And then Aurora has her romance with the next door neighbor that is in itself, odd and untraditional.
Yeah, I was thinking about it this morning when I was getting ready. I thought there was an interesting kind of parallel between you almost are seeing the death of Emma's relationship and the birth of Aurora's, like progressing through the course of the movie. There were so many things that made me angry in this movie.
Okay.
Well, why did you pick it?
I picked it because I did a Google search and marriage movies, because I thought if I'm going to talk about a movie and sound somewhat like I know what I'm talking about therapy wise, I feel the most well versed in talking about couples therapy and couples. So I thought, let's pick a movie where there's going to be that dynamic. And, it was just one of these rando searches. And so that came up and I was like, oh, well, that's one of my all-time favorite movies. So
it's
maybe
one of
I should
your favorites.
Do that.
It seems like it seems like a movie that I would have so much trouble going, oh, I want to watch that just because of the ending.
Yeah. Well, I think the first time I saw it, so it came out when I was 12. Did not see it in the theater. It must have been years later. I don't know the first time I saw it, but I'm sure it was on TV, just being played. And then it just, when I would see it on, I would watch it again. Then I owned it. I think I had it on like VHS or something, and so it had been a while since I had watched it, but I've probably watched it maybe 5 or 6 times. But to me, I put it in a category with like a Steel Magnolias, an On Golden Pond, movies that make you laugh and make you cry are like my total favorite.
Yeah.
Even though I like big comedies too that just make me laugh, but if you can like get my heart, but then also have like some lighthearted, funny parts, I love that.
Well, it feels like that would encompass more of what real life is.
Right.
Because it's real life is not all comedy. It's not all tragedy. It's this delicate interweaving of the two.
Right.
And the two make each other that much more strong.
Yeah. And this movie, I think you can feel the quality of it. It makes sense to me that it won awards. In other words, like it's well crafted. It's the characters are vivid. The performances are good. Nothing feels, to me anyway, nothing felt like lacking in that, in artistically speaking. I will say that something that stood out to me for the first time, differently this time, and I think it's because of our time in our culture right now, is the scene when Jack Nicholson so Garrett is his name. Jack Nicholson and Shirley MacLaine finally go out on their date, much delayed.
Is it the part when she spins the car and throws him out, and then?
Yes, and they're kissing, and then he immediately puts his hand down the front of her dress. And I think when I had seen it in the past, I thought, well, that's uncomfortable, and that's awkward and moving really fast. But it didn't really bother me, I think, because they play it very comedically. Because then, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, his hand gets stuck in there. She's wearing this tight dress.
Oh, I was wondering what happened, because he reacts as if a mousetrap is in there. I'm
sure it is not accurate in terms of physics or whatever. Like, I'm thinking his hand could have gotten out of there. But the way they play it, like the angle is like her dress is now tight on it, and it's stuck in there somehow, and he's trying to get it out. She's saying, "Get it out, get it out." And then she's furious and embarrassed, and she keeps saying, "If you wouldn't have gotten drunk," she blames it on that he had been, or if you hadn't been drinking so much. And then that's kind of, then it's just the rest of the date is ruined.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, so now when I'm looking at that in light of Me Too and just heightened awareness of what women think they should accept or what men think is acceptable, or, I was like, oh, that felt yucky.
Yeah, I think there was more about that relationship. I mean, it seemed to me at the beginning, especially, they have this conversation across the fence. I think maybe when they first, even though maybe have seen each other, but the first time they talk,
yes,
it seems like there's a weird power dynamic. Like, he's a retired astronaut and typically dates a lot younger women, so he came across to me as somebody who, like, once he decided that he wanted to date her, expected her to just go right along with it. She should feel
honored and privileged. Yeah,
he's entitled, and she should be in the line. And whenever he gets to her, then cool, it's your turn. And she didn't respond that way. In fact, I think it was like a couple years, and she came up to the front door and was like, "Cool, remember how you asked me to lunch?" And he's like, "What?"
Well, do you remember? And with the reason, because at first she said he was inviting her to go to the White House with him. Yeah, and he thought the other astronaut wives would look down on him if he brought one of his typical girls, he said, meaning much younger. Oh, yeah, and he said that. And I thought, I don't know if this is the sales pitch that's going to win her over. So, but she was, but then, I want to say maybe, now it's getting a little blurry, but she was positive on it, but then he was sort of like, well, let's just skip right over lunch and go inside and get in bed, kind of, and she was like, I am not, no way. So then that was the 2 to 3 year hiatus on the progression of their relationship there. Yeah. But yeah, very kind of that typical kind of womanizer, sleazy kind of a vibe going there.
Yeah. I think So I mentioned before, it seems like, Aurora, it's the journey of kind of like the birth and the coming alive of her relationship, while Emma's is not. It seems like her as a character as well kind of comes online to emotions, to engagement, since the movie starts with the death of her husband.
Well, the movie really starts with her going in and pinching her baby Emma.
Standing on a step stool and practically getting in the crib to make sure that she's still
breathing.
Yeah.
And then once the baby's crying, then she leaves.
Yeah.
Rather than
Let's talk about that
her.
attachment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's, yeah.
Like it's really all about, I need her to be okay for me.
Mm-hmm. I'm not okay unless she's okay.
Right.
But then what's funny is she makes her not okay by pinching her and then she leaves.
Yes. Because now I know she's okay. So I can be calm. But now I've just upset her little world.
But I'm thinking of, it may have been at the wedding, Emma's wedding. I can't quite remember. But there's a scene where she is straightening up this like snack tray. She's like making the table look just so. And then Flap comes up and says they have a brief discussion, which for those two characters always ends terribly. And then he like takes a cracker and dips it in this. It looked like a hedgehog or something.
Fish or something.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
but he ruins the design, and it ruins her.
Yeah.
But that's kind of at the beginning where clearly, in her grief, in her sadness, in her hurt, whatever it was, her answer was, I'm going to close myself down. I'm going to take control of my environment. And then as things progress through the movie, it's stuff like she's comfortable running down her grandson and grabbing onto him in his grief and his pain. And like she just, I think, opens up as a person the longer the movie goes on.
Yes.
And she does have this relationship with Jack Nicholson's character that I don't know if that's what did it, but it certainly contributed. It certainly helped that growth.
Yeah. To me, one of the big story arcs relationally is like around boundaries, if you're looking for, and then, I mean, the night before the wedding, she's telling her, Aurora's telling Emma, I think you're making a big mistake. And she was like, if you feel that way about my husband, about my marriage, then I don't think you better be there. And it feels like she doesn't think she'll go through with it. But then sure enough, her mom just doesn't come to the wedding. Yeah. Which we don't see, but it gets alluded to. So she draws that boundary, which feels like, whew, that's a big boundary. And her mom was like, called her bluff, like, okay, I won't come. But then the very next morning, the first day of the honeymoon, the phone is ringing. And Emma's like, nope, I'm not going to answer it yet. And
I got the sense that it wasn't just the next morning, that there was a couple of different days. Like we were skipping a bit again, and the phone would ring, and the phone would ring, and the phone would ring. And at first they'd pick it up and hang it up. And then eventually, like, she grabs it and says something like, I don't want to talk to you right now. And then ends up.
Immediately she's right back in. Yeah. Yeah. And there was a point in there too, where Flap picked up the phone and said, I would appreciate it from now on if you would wait an hour longer before you call in the morning, because she had woken them up, I think. And so to me, I'm like, see, they're trying. Like they're trying to create some distance there. But it's like the force of the mother-daughter is stronger than, it's too hard to hold that boundary because Aurora is such a force. But the other thing I think is so interesting is that Emma is really her mom's emotional rock. When mom is, even as a teenager, the daughter, Emma, would be the one who would be like, oh, mom, you're okay, or kind of cheer her up or buoy her up and take all of her little nitpicking comments and just kind of appear to let them roll off her back. And that's just my mom. And her friends would be like, I don't want to see her, no, I don't want to talk to your mom. Like, obviously she's a scary, formidable woman. And she was the one who could take it. But so it was kind of that role reversal. I felt like
Do you think it was
mother-daughter.
parentification?
Kind of, where she emotionally, Emma was the one who was kind of more steady and buoyant and could laugh and be silly. And her mom was, we got to have it looking right, always picking at her hair, her clothes, So there was that, I felt like there was that role reversal there between mother and daughter pretty early.
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking with like Aurora's journey. Was it seemed like at the beginning she was just a very closed down, unhappy, which I'm sure had to be from the grief. I mean, 100%. I also thought it was interesting. It appeared that she was having dinner parties where men were over.
I know. I'd
And it
forgotten
seemed
about
like
that part.
she was so uninterested in all of them.
But it was like she had him on a string. She let him cozy up and be real complimentary, to where if you really were like, I'm not at all interested, and they need to know that, it wasn't respectful or kind to these men to let them keep on longing for her and making fools of themselves. There are multiple ones at the same dinner.
Yeah.
And they're
The taller
whispering
one
in their ear, and
said
Danny
a
DeVito
poem, and then like did this really weird slow lean in for a kiss, and then she like immediately turned to Danny DeVito, who had so much hair, still was bald but had so much more hair than now, but leaned into him and like kissed him right after that, and I just thought, this is so weird. Like, what is?
But it was like that they were all at an arm's length, so she must have gotten something good. She
got something out of it.
Yeah, something that made her feel valued or wanted by these men, but she was not interested in any of them. Sorry. Yeah, but that was a weird part that I had kind of forgotten about when I watched it. I'm like, this is so odd.
I almost thought that maybe, they'd have one of them where Jack Nicholson showed up, and then it would, turn it all on its head.
Right, disrupt the whole thing.
Because maybe she would be so interested in him, but he would feign, not interest in her, and it would, kind of turn those tables.
Yeah.
When it comes to Emma in the movie, every one of the parts that made me mad involved her.
Okay.
Because, and what's interesting is, like, when you watched this again for this time, did you watch it with your husband?
No, I actually watched it with my daughter.
Oh. Oh. Did you guys just melt on the couch at the end?
Yeah, I think she was falling asleep. We watched it kind of late. And I feel like she had caught like the end of it on TV with me another time. So she knew what was coming. And she's not nearly as emotionally, I don't think she gets as emotionally invested in movies as I do. But I was, of course, in a puddle, as I always am every single time I watch it. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
But so her journey through it, the actual wedding and the interesting play between Flap and Aurora. But I think the first thing that kind of, and the reason why I asked if you watched it with your husband was, Leigh-Ann and I watch all these movies together when we were getting ready for an episode. And so it's always so fascinating to me when we come down on different sides about a movie. Because we watched the same movie at the same time on the same couch. So how is it that we might, So there was a part where Flap came home in the morning, I want to say, and she was like, hey, where are you? And he said, I fell asleep on the couch in the library.
Yes.
And she just kind of took a pause and like got a face and was like, I'm on to you. And he was like, what? And she like accused him of cheating. And I think she was pregnant at the time. And I think she said something along the lines of like, if you're trying to get away with this while I'm carrying your child, like, you're just the worst person ever. And this is your chance to like fess up. And if you don't, then you're like doubling down on being terrible.
Yes.
I walked out of that scene. I don't remember anything before that would have alluded to him, cheating or anything. And so I walked out of that scene thinking, oh, maybe she's paranoid. Maybe she's at the house and is inventing a story because she needs the drama, or something like that. And Leigh-Ann was like, oh no, he's a dirty cheater. Like, he's been.
Well, I think there had been another little bit of a time jump. So I think I was with Leigh-Ann thinking, we're now ahead, and I'm buying in that this makes sense.
I knew that they were on their second kid. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I knew that there had been some kind of little thing. I just felt like maybe I'd missed something.
I don't think so.
Some
Because
clue.
there's a sweet moment when they have, because she's pregnant with her third child when that happens. And when they just had the two boys, there was that morning when he's leaving and she brings up that they haven't had sex in for a certain amount of time, and we never go, and it really wasn't very long. It was like we never go a week or something.
And he comes back.
And she's like, I love that you came back. And you're just like, oh, that's so sweet. And because as I'm watching this, knowing I'm preparing to come and talk about it through this lens, I'm watching their marriage, of course. And I'm like, okay, so there's a good sign. Like, that was a really sweet connecting move, right? That he came back and then she was like open arms and excited. And that was sweet.
She does a thing where I see it with her mom a lot. She runs and does a hug, but she wraps her legs around him too.
Like all in.
It's a full body hug.
Yes. I mean, I think that's part of what I love about the movie is her just like bigness of how she expresses her feelings. And yes, but then that morning, the thing that stood out to me, and maybe it's the woman point of view, he says to her, you always get paranoid when you're pregnant. And I was like, you
I
just
did
said
hear that, and that's okay.
Like putting
So
it on her,
maybe-
like you're probably kind of crazy for
Little
thinking
gaslighting.
that. Yes.
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, but you don't know at that point.
Yeah.
If you're watching it for the first time, you're like, she could be kind of paranoid.
That's
and
what
that's
what I
pointing
thought.
out. Yeah, you get a little emotional, but when you've seen it and no, this is probably the beginning of the affair. You're like, oh, I can't believe he just said that.
So then the thing where the mad comes in is the affair that she starts with John Lithgow.
Right.
Which I don't know if they're having money troubles or something, but she's in the grocery store. She's got her two kids. She's in the line. She has, I think, $38. The bill's $45. And the cashier is like,
so impatient.
yeah. And so she
jerk.
starts handing stuff back, and the cashier's like, now it's 42. Now you're going the wrong way and all that. And John Lithgow, and I don't remember his name at all, but was,
Sam.
Sam was like, hey, do you remember me? I denied you for a loan at the bank. or
Yes,
something.
yes.
Would you like me to help you out? And so he covers her, and then they start this affair. And I think what made me so mad was, which this is, to me, I'm going to use the word fair, but like, here she is accusing her husband of something, and I think at this point is still not sure. And then she begins her own thing. And then to like flash forward from there, carries on that affair for many years. And then even when she catches her husband red-handed, which this is a whole nother level of anger, his response in that moment was, you caught us before we did anything.
Right.
Like, that line just set me on fire. But even after she catches him, she continues on with her affair. Does she end up telling him about that? Because I did not see her ever tell her husband that she was having an affair.
No, I don't think she does, because he says something about, I don't ask you where you go on your little Sunday afternoon drives. So it's implied that he
knows.
He is pretty sure. And then there's a point when she's sick and he says, you can feel like they're going to get into that. And something he says, well, we don't need to rehash everything. And she's like, it's like she's registering as like, yeah, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, let's not get into it. We don't need to talk about all that.
Yeah.
So I took it that they never actually had that conversation.
That anger just came up in me in regards to that, like that relationship, because I just thought, and then I think my anger peaked at the very end where she and he are having a discussion about where the kids are going to be. Because in that discussion, he's sitting on her bedside. She has to lay down. She has cancer, and it's too much for her to like sit up.
Yeah.
he comes in and they start having this talk, and she says something along the lines of like, well, do you want the kids? And he is smiling,
Pauses.
and he doesn't really answer. And then she says something like, well, the boys can go with so-and-so, the daughter can go with so-and-so. What made me so angry was that both characters were smiling during that scene. And, I paused and said to Leigh-Ann at some point, their face doesn't match the words that they're saying. And I'm so caught up in, righteous anger of justice for these kids or something.
Mm-hmm.
And Leigh-Ann said something along the lines of that she thought the feelings had been so drained out of the marriage that they were just emotionally checked out of the marriage, that at this point they're basically talking in practicalities, and they're both kind of coming to an understanding, like, oh yeah, you really would be bad at raising them, let's get them with so and so to give them a good fighting chance, and coming to that agreement. I think at the beginning she just goes, I'm so glad we're talking again, so to even be having a discussion about where the kid's gonna go, and maybe just
Right.
having that brief, I'm going to use air quotes and say connection, in the sense of an agreement
Yeah.
about what they both want, maybe brought them some kind of happiness.
Well,
At that end
I
part.
can't remember the scene, but there's another point earlier in the movie where he says to her, "You're so easy to please." And I can't remember what it is. Oh, well, maybe it's that same scene. He wears the tie
Yep.
that she had bought for him when they were early in their marriage, and she's like just over the moon about it. And he says, you've always been so easy to please," something like that. And I think, yeah, like she's taking crumbs, but that just seems to be her nature, and maybe it's because she had to be that for her mom always, like the positive, the buoyancy, the keep it light,
And take what crumbs her mom would give her.
yeah,
Oh my gosh, let's talk about attachment. That's it. That's got to be it.
right,
That she learned to survive off of love crumbs, to quote Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And so that's what she took from her marriage as well. But even stuff like, there was one part where maybe it was after she caught him, I can't remember, but she ends up finding out she's at her friend's house at the pool, and she gets a phone call, and he says, I've accepted this position, we're going to be moving, and she's crying on the phone, and she throws it on the chair, and I thought, oh, he just said he wants a divorce or something, but he says, we're moving to a different state. She's very upset.
Yeah,
She
she had
says,
been-
without my consent. And then when she gets
they were
back to
kind
the
of
house,
separated, yeah,
when she gets back to the house, he just walks up and they kiss, and then they just keep going. And I just thought, what, huh? Like, because I'm just thinking, oh man, the discussion that I would have to have upon that first like meeting again of, you made what decision without me? And
yes, and she has to leave Sam,
yeah,
her safe connection, because he is just sweet to her, and he's non-threatening, and he adores her, and he's gentle, the affair partner. So she's going to leave that. Little do we know, he's following his affair partner to
Yeah.
Omaha, I think is where they go. But yeah,
I just kind of realized that Aurora is a very stern, can we say stern figure in Emma's life. Her husband absent, primarily
Yeah.
because of the job. So I'm thinking like avoidant attachment, anxious attachment. And then Sam is this completely other different type of person, where I would say he seems to be more securely attached. And maybe that's what sucked her into the affair, was just
yeah,
on one side, I've got somebody who is so anxiously attached, they're going to come into my crib and pinch me to make sure that I'm still
right,
breathing. On the other, I've got somebody who is away, who is cold, who I kind of have to even say, hey, we haven't had sex in I don't know how long, and then here's this one guy who is coming in and offering
just
to help, and
steady and kind and reliable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's like that classic anxious pursuer, which makes me wonder. I feel like Flap's message for himself might be, "Yep, I'll never be enough." Like that's what Aurora said about him. Like he's a failure, he's not enough. So his message,
Well,
"Yep, I'll just keep failing. I'll never be enough." And you
Yeah.
got Emma, who's like, I come here, and she's big, and she, her
Mm-hmm.
personality, and she loves hard and passionately, but you could almost see him sometimes like backing up, and
I thought it was so crazy that Aurora was giving him so much flack for Flap at the
Yeah.
beginning because he was going to be a professor. And I
Right.
just thought, professor's not enough? Like, that is such a
Yeah.
highly respected job that
Maybe not enough money in it. I don't know. They lived
maybe.
in a nice house. They she had full-time help.
Oh, yeah.
Rosie, who seemed, I don't know if she lived with them, but she was there all the time. So, they had some money, they had some means. So I don't know if Flap wasn't going to make enough money or what. But yeah, but it felt like he wore that. And that's when, getting back to the hospital bed conversation, that's how I saw it. His smile to me was a smile of embarrassment. Like, kind of like a little boy who was allowed to act like a little boy and not be responsible. And like, like, yeah, I guess I kind of, like, he knew that he should say, yes. I think he even said, I'd love to say I could raise those kids and I really
Yeah.
would miss them, but yeah, probably not the best. I don't know if I'd have enough time for them.
I kind of wondered if maybe he was smiling because he was getting what he wanted, like he was getting off the hook.
Maybe. And she was so ready to let him off the hook,
Yeah.
which was surprising in terms of normal, what you think of as healthy ways of dealing with who's going to have kids after their mom dies.
Mm-hmm.
But that it would even be a major conversation, or that the dad wouldn't be the primary or at least involved. It didn't even sound like you're going to have them regularly. It was just like, you can see them when you want.
Yeah.
It was so odd.
It also seemed like he didn't want him at all. And so like, my anger kind of peaked at that one part.
Mm.
And I was saying to Leigh-Ann, like, I don't understand how he could not want his kids. Like, if it were me, and I said, and I might be projecting, and she goes, oh, it's 100% what you're doing. Like, you're putting yourself and thinking, what would I do in that situation? But that's not him. He's not.
And I wonder too, if it, in terms of the time period, early 80s,
Mm-hmm.
if there were a little bit more of that feeling of, the kids, moms take care of kids need moms more than they need dads provide.
Yeah.
I don't know if did that feel in 1984 as jarring and strange as it feels now.
Yeah.
That we're so much more in touch with the importance of dads tend to be so much more involved in the daily lives of their kids.
Yeah.
And their care. So maybe it wasn't as strange that would be discussed. But
What's weird, right after that scene, we were kind of having that same discussion, and then the first thing that popped in my mind, and I don't remember what year this was, but the movie Mr. Mom with Michael Keaton, and how to even have a movie about a guy that stayed home was such a, like, big deal kind of foundation shaking thing.
Yeah.
In the 80s. Maybe that's the truth, and that's how that movie was even made, is like, this wasn't something that was expected or of guys, of dads. But
Yeah.
I just thought, I'm looking back now, and there's several scenes in the movie that I would say, like, oh, okay, let's sit in that scene when she brings the two boys into her bedside, and the older of the two is just so, it on the surface appears to be anger. I think it's really rage, because I think he's just so scared of what's going to possibly happen. And the younger of the two is just so tender and is just
Yes.
tearing up automatic. And when the
So
older kind of
sweet.
smarts off at mom, the younger, which clearly pattern of screaming in this family. Aurora does it, Emma does it, and here the little one just screams back at the older, shut up, don't, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I thought she was going to tell them that they weren't going to be with their dad. I thought that's why they came in, but I think it was just a goodbye.
Yeah. I sat there and thought for a second, like, well, what would I have done? What would be the most emotionally healthy thing to do? I mean, that she told Tommy, who was so angry, I know that you're angry at me and you maybe think that I don't know.
You're pretending to hate me.
I know you don't hate me. I know you like me, and he was kind of looking at her. He won't give in with his emotions. He's holding strong. But she frees him from that, which I thought was so...
What a gift. When he's older...
My mom knows.
If she wouldn't have been able to say that, I mean, because of what her illness is doing, or emotionally, if she wouldn't be able to say that, and he would have gotten 15, 20 years down the road.
Right, that pain of regret could have been crushing.
But for her to have, just powered through his stankness.
Yes.
To be able to say to him, I know this, I know this, I know this.
Yeah. What did you think? Because I thought I would bring those kids in and I would have just wept with them. I think, and I don't know that that's right. I thought, I don't know. Would that be too much on them? Was her way better, where she was put on the makeup and kept the stiff upper lip and was and cut it short because I'm going to get upset. So we got to keep this short. So bye guys. I'm like, that doesn't feel
I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I don't think there's a right or a wrong.
But
I think,
oh gosh, I just think I would have just had to weep with them.
Yeah. And that, I was projecting onto Flap, and that might be you as a mother going, this is what I would have needed in that moment.
But would it have been the generous thing? Would that have been best for the kids? It would have been what I needed.
Yeah.
But would that have been too much for kids who can't cope with all that right now? Take on mommy's, try to help mommy not feel, it's just so hard.
Oh, you were coming at it from that way. I thought that you were just coming at it from I just need to hug my kids and I'm going to be crying and it's because I love them so much. But
right. Yeah.
You're saying
I'm
for her to deal with...
in every moment that I can that I have left and let them be close to me and be in here and be around. Again, that might be a newer way of thinking about moving through tough situations.
I don't know. I mean, it does seem like there's elements throughout the movie. You see it a lot with Aurora, but I think certainly with Emma putting on the makeup of keeping up appearances. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe it was just since she says in either the scene after or the scene before that she's so weak she can't even sit up or stand up. Maybe it's just she couldn't get a whole hug in and be okay with that.
It felt like she was trying to be strong for them and keep positive, because then she says, I thought that went really well, don't you? I was kind of scared, but
to the little one as he's walking out,
I think it was okay. I mean, her ability to just grab energy and positivity from somewhere was quite something, I felt.
Do you think, which, we're always talking about fictional characters when we talk about this stuff, but
right.
Do you think that's because she is a nothing is as bad as it seems person? Or do you think it's because she's I'm afraid of engaging with quote unquote negative emotions person?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm kind of rolling through the movie in my head, trying to find times where she did go to harder places. When she goes to visit Patsy in New York and her posh friends are, kind of silenced by her having cancer, and she's like, good grief, this is just cancer, and she gets kind of upset and kind of is more real about it. There she feels like, I want to be able to be real about this. I don't want to have to paint a shiny picture on this thing. So that's a little different, I don't know.
Yeah, that might be kind of a hiding out in the open kind of thing. You say something that shocks people so much they're not going to ask you something different.
That's true.
or something again.
Push him away by saying a shocking thing.
I don't know. Yeah, the kids. And then after the kids leave the room, Aurora is like walking them out of the hospital, and
Yeah.
the older one, what does he say? He says something about Emma.
Aurora's saying, when you come to Houston, we've got really good scouts there. And he says, yeah, my mom would never look into that. She's too lazy.
Yes, and Aurora just slaps the taste out of his mouth. And, he starts running away, and she chases him down, and in holding him, I think slaps him again. And what's funny is there is a red mark on that kid's face.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't notice that. I
rewound and paused. There's a red mark on his face.
Wow.
So here's to method acting.
Mm-hmm.
But, he is just clearly so distraught. And so instead of scolding him, she basically restrains him and holds him until the dam breaks.
Yes.
And he just starts sobbing into her shoulder.
Don't you think that those kids, their home was, I feel like he was probably floating around a little unseen, because he, as that age, he didn't need them, to get him dressed in the morning or whatever. But it felt like the distraction of the marriage and things falling apart in the marriage, and Dad pursuing his doctorate or whatever he was going for, and Mom's over having this affair, they were just kind of probably taking care of themselves.
Yeah. He might have been
and
the lost
cancer,
child, yeah.
of course. Yeah, I love that part. And even though you're like, should she slap him? No. But at the end of that whole, the slap, the chase, the grab and holding him and just like almost having to wrestle him. I loved her for that,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, he just needs somebody to be like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Come what may. I'm not going anywhere. I can take your anger. I'm not going to let you dog your mom. But,
yeah. And she
I'm
says,
going to
you're
have a
not
boundary.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think that there's one thing that keeps popping up on every episode is the need to belong. And I think there's a different kind of a need to belong, where at certain parts in our lives, we need another person to look at us and say, you're with me. Come here.
Uh-huh.
Versus like, I'm going to find my tribe and I'm going to go join them. It's a childhood thing probably, but for somebody to point and say, you're with me.
Yeah, that's huge.
And I think that at that point, that was Aurora saying, you're with me. Mm-hmm. You're mine now. I've got you. I'm going to be here. And I don't know if she could have done that before that point in her story. Mm-hmm. Like looking back over the course of the whole movie, it seems like something had freed up in her to allow her to do that.
Yes. Which means, okay, two things we have to touch on in Aurora's story, I feel like. There's a moment when finally I think they're a little ways into their relationship where they, she kind of basically invites him to bed, is how they get
to look at her Renoir.
Right, Renoir. But he knows and she
and he's
knows.
like, and that's in your bedroom? And she's like, yeah. He's like,
Yes.
all right.
Yes. So they get past the awkward date. Time goes by, and then she's just like, not too much time goes by. Like, okay, I guess I want this to happen, so I'm going to invite him over. And so they've been spending some time together, I think, and he was non-committal, and they're in bed, and he's telling her, he's being vulnerable. I'm coming off of a marriage intensive weekend that I helped with, so vulnerability and the beauty and the magnetic draw of vulnerability in your partner was like fresh in my head. I think that's why I noticed this so much. But so in his sharing, like this was the cool thing about being an astronaut. And man, he's like, I really wish we would have just sat around, just us, and said, can you believe how fun that was?
Yeah, I think he said there's 160 of us in the whole world.
Yeah.
Or something.
That get to do this thing. And we never just pushed past like the importance of it. And we're just like, wasn't that so fun? And he's just being like, he's letting his real self out, in this vulnerable way. And she is like lit up like a Christmas tree. Like her eyes are shining and she's just watching, laying next to him, looking at him, listening, just like eating it up with a fork and spoon. And then she says, you know what? This is my moment. Because he's saying he's talking about his moment with the stars and whatever. That was his moment. She goes, this is my moment. And I think, oh my gosh, that's so vulnerable. Like I'm worried for her in that moment. And she even goes, don't get scared or something like that. Don't get nervous. She knows. She's like, I just put it out there and I'm probably scaring him away. And it's just like this beautiful, sweet, but so vulnerable moment. And we've been taught in this movie, he's taught her and he's taught us, like, I'm not that guy. Like, don't count on me. I'm going to date a lot of women. I never promised you I wasn't,
He even says that explicitly.
Yeah. Like, here's the expectations. And she's just kind of at that point thrown caution to the wind completely. And then when he, sure enough, does come and have the talk with her, like, I think we need to, you can tell, like, she saw it coming. She's mad at him and frustrated with him. But you don't sense that she regrets it. Mm-hmm. And it changed her. Mm-hmm. And I feel like between that and then Emma's cancer, just having to let go completely of her appearance, like her roots are all out, her gray is showing, she's all bedraggled, which she always looks like. Mm-hmm. She's got it all together before then. The other moment that I just think is dear is when she gets the call from Emma and she hangs up and she grabs Rosie, the housekeeper, who obviously is really close to their family.
The call about the cancer?
Yes. And she goes, our girl's in trouble. Rosie, our girl's in trouble. And just breaks down in Rosie's arms. And Rosie is just right there with her. It was like just beautifully heartbreaking, But you're like, yeah, she has Rosie. Clearly Rosie is a safe person, cares about this family.
You mentioned that phone call, and I thought about the one right before it. I think it's an interesting mirror because for most of their life, Emma had been the one picking up positive crumbs of positivity.
Right.
She calls Aurora to say, I've got these lumps in my armpit, and then she spins it positive.
Yes.
Well, that you haven't really ever been into cleaning, and so
I know,
it's
and
probably
she even
just
uses this at another time to like take a little dig at her.
It's probably a clogged sweat gland. And
yeah, you never were good at cleaning.
You don't have to worry about that. That's just and then like Emma gets this giant grin on her face at that, like, okay. Oh well, mom is saying that it's a
Yes.
And I think about all of the doctors that we have in our family, none of them official, but all of it's my two great aunts that are just, hey, I've got this pain. Well, it's gonna be this, so you're gonna need to do this, that, and the other.
Oh, wow.
And I'll tell you, I made a joke about that one time. I had a great aunt that and their sisters, but they was being taken to the hospital for pains in her abdomen, and my other great aunt said, well, I bet it's her gallbladder. Her gallbladder is just, they're going to end up having to take that out, and it's going to be, and I said, well, okay, Dr. Treese, I'm sure that's, whatever. Well, it was her gallbladder.
Wow.
And I just thought, you know what, I guess you do have your unofficial doctorate in medicine, so I can't really say anything about this anymore.
That's funny.
It was a movie that I feel like, it reminds me of a roller coaster in that, for me, it took me a while to get fully invested. And then it feels like at the end, man, that is just that whole thing coming down and I think about, they're all, Flap and Aurora are sitting in the room with Emma when Emma dies. And first I had to rewind it because I was like, did she just die? Because I didn't quite know. And then the nurse comes in and just like shakes Flap and says, she's gone. And I thought, that's how you tell him? Like, that's...
Yeah.
What in the world? But then Aurora just wails. I mean, lamentations in the fullest extent of the word. And even at one point says something like, oh God, I thought it would feel like a relief, but it doesn't.
Yes, I'm so stupid. Yes. Yeah. That line, that moment I mean, that earned her the Oscar right there. And just gripping onto Flap, who
Who
she
she
doesn't even
hates.
like,
Yeah.
but she's just like, he's
But
all
he's
she's got
there.
in that moment. And you just feel how wrecked she is. But then what is so sweet is then at the end, so the last scene after the funeral, the visitation or whatever, back at the house, and here are all these men who she had on the string. They're still there for her because they care about her. And Patsy's there, and Flap's there, and then Garrett, the old scoundrel, who showed up, who flew to where they were at the hospital and showed up for her, and she is just a wreck. And she's like, I don't care. I don't care. And then you remember when he leaves, then she says, I love you. And he doesn't say anything back until she turns around. I'm just curious. Did you want to say anything to that? She's like, I don't care. It's part of that, what we were talking about, that arc for her. That's just like, you know what? I'm out here with my heart and with my emotions. I can't keep it all together anymore. It's so beautiful. But then how the group is there and Jack Nicholson's character, talks to Tommy, the angry son, and why don't we go for a swim? I think it would be okay. And she looks over and
I'm a
sees
swimmer too.
that.
I thought you were an astronaut. Well, I'm both.
Right. And it's just, you're like, okay, she's going to be okay.
I kind of got the sense that he was back in the picture.
Yes, I do too.
Yeah.
I had that too. I mean, yeah, after he showed up and it felt like he realized, okay, this woman is important to me. Because he had to get over himself too.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole other...
I think they both had masks. She was I've got it all together, and you're not going to get past my defenses, and I'm strong, and I'm this. And then he was playing a part of the big deal astronaut womanizer guy. And
yes, all protecting.
And they both end up being their real self by the end.
Right. Yeah. Which I love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a great movie.
I'm glad you liked it.
And I'm still sticking by. It is so different than just anything that's around today. I think that, if you're looking to open up discussions about relationship, I think perfect movie for it, because there is so many layers in it. That you're not going to watch this and just have one type of discussion about relationship.
Right.
You can go a million different ways. Wow. I mean, even just about one character in it.
Right.
Wow. So, Karin, thank you so much again. This has just been so fun. Let's say that somebody has listened to this today and they just love hearing you, and they think that they would have a good connection with you, and they want to see you as a client. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So my practice that I share with my partner, Liz Porter, who I feel like I should have definitely have mentioned in my earlier part of this, who I met in my first class.
Well, we're going to hope that Liz is going to be on an episode in the future.
Well,
so
she is my
this
person.
is the little tease that we're giving people.
Okay. I got to just tell you, if I went through that whole program and spent all that money and all I walked away with was my friendship with Liz, it would have been worth every penny. So we are in practice together, which is a gift. And we are Hope Grove Counseling. Hope Grove Counseling.
Okay.
So hopegrovecounseling.com, all one word together, is where you can find me.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm up in the convent building in Hillsborough Village.
Which hopefully people will have an easier time finding than I did.
Right.
But I am directionally impaired, so that is probably not on anybody but me.
Yes, and I got this little tiny office that used to be a nun's bedroom. It's really cozy. And yeah.
Wow. I almost forgot. I started last week doing something where I've opened it up to where listeners can write in with a question.
Okay.
Would you be comfortable answering a question that came from somebody?
Of course.
And I mean, well, us, like we're going to,
Yeah.
So somebody wrote in and they said that they've got some stuff going on in their marriage and that they would like to explore the possibility of counseling.
Mm-hmm.
How can somebody get started? Where does one even begin if they've never engaged with counseling and they want to maybe do marriage counseling?
You mean, how do they find a marriage counselor? Or
Sure. But also, what if they don't know what counseling is? How do they
Okay.
identify, here's what we're going to work on? If they just know we're in trouble,
yeah.
what do we do?
Well, first of all, I think if you're feeling like we're in trouble, reach out for some help. Whether that is somebody you respect their marriage, you talk to something. Of course, I see great value in working with a therapist, somebody who's trained. I would say it's not as scary as you might think it is. It's just a person who, if they're doing their job right, is going to listen and care and not judge and just want to be and join in with you and be of a help.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, if you're thinking about it, that probably means you should do it. Because what do they tell us in school? Like, the typical couple waits 5 years, 7 years past when they first notice that maybe there's some problems to do anything about it. And what we know is that the longer you wait, those problems don't tend to just take care of themselves. And instead, they become more deeply entrenched.
And habits and
it's like, your neural pathways are being formed, and you just automatically go to those go-to responses, which tend to be patterns of disconnection.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get, all couples have this to some degree, and you get disconnected. And then the tricky thing is, how do I now get back to somebody
Connected.
the very person who just hurt me?
Yeah.
How do I now get vulnerable and reach out for them? So I would say that is a great impulse to follow, and it's there's no shame in that game,
right. I love the first part of your answer. You said find somebody whose marriage you respect. It reminds me so much of what you were saying was your journey earlier on, where you had an inkling of pursuing something, and then you went and found somebody who was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, can I take you to coffee? Can I ask you these things? So if I'm hearing what you're saying, it's, if quote unquote finding a therapist is daunting, just find somebody that you care about and that you respect and that maybe you even look up to because of their relationship, and ask for some input, ask for some feedback or some help.
Mm-hmm.
As a first step. Let's say that they get to the point where maybe they know, seeing a counselor is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
What can they do then?
Well, if you feel comfortable being honest about that with any of your friends, I think asking for recommendations from friends, or if you happen to have heard of a friend mm-hmm. and they talked about, they went to see this counselor and that was really good. I think that's so great to have a personal, recommendation
mm-hmm.
or referral. I feel strongly about EFT for couples, so I always would recommend that somebody find somebody that works in EFT. That's just me. But if you're like, I don't know anybody who's seeing a therapist, or I don't feel comfortable even disclosing that to anybody, you can Google, find a therapist in your town.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, Psychology Today is a site that comes up, and a lot of therapists have a profile on
mm-hmm.
there, and you can read about what their specialty is and see a picture of them and a little blurb. And so that's kind of, if you're going from just from zero, looking for somebody, and then I would say it's okay. Like, you can be a little bit picky. You want to go in, you don't have to, this might not be your person.
Please be picky.
Right.
Like, I'm a therapist, you're a therapist, we're saying please be picky. Know that you have a voice in it. Mm-hmm. And that when you're seeing a therapist, so much of the work is based in the relationship.
Right.
That if you aren't feeling like the relationship is a good fit, then you're not going to get what you're looking for out of that therapist.
Yes.
And it's, I tell my clients this all the time. It's okay to say where you're at in the work, mm-hmm. hey, I don't think this is working.
Right.
Any therapist worth their salt is then going to want to know more. Can you tell me what's not working for you in an effort to try to improve it? But in the end, if it's not going to work, I would hope that anybody worth their salt would say, thank you so much for telling me. Would you like me to refer you to some other people and, give you some names, or, maybe you'd like to do your own search. I'm not real sure.
Yes.
So please know that you have a voice in any kind of therapeutic work that you're doing.
Yes. I'm sure you've heard this too. I tried therapy, but I don't really like the therapist, or they said this thing that really bothered me, and they don't go back. And I get it, because it's a vulnerable thing to do. It's really, you have to be really brave.
In your most vulnerable time of need. And then if somebody meets you with any kind of like condescension or shame or anything, like I could just see
like, nope.
I completely get it. Be like, nope. And then you're out.
And then I guess therapy's not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rather than, going ahead and finding somebody else, trying again, which I get it. That takes a lot of effort, but I would...
To expend that kind of energy to even get in the room in the first place.
That's so big.
So I've had a couple clients that have found me because they Googled our town and my specialty. So it was something like Nashville, Tennessee, or Brentwood, Tennessee, sex addiction recovery, or sex addiction therapy, or something like that.
Okay.
So I would say, talk to people you respect, get online, find a therapist, or even just Google, marriage counseling and the name of your town. And I would echo what you said too about recommending EFT. That's something that I use with my couples as well, and I just think it's such a giant help, especially for people if they're stuck.
Yes. I think the research shows that, the amount of lasting change is
it's one
greater.
That has a longitudinal study, so they have tracking data on people over the course of 20-something years to show that.
Yeah, you're getting below just let's learn some communication skills and work through, negotiate through this thing we disagree on. It's like you're going way down deep below that to what's really happening, and do I feel heard and safe?
It's not what you're fighting about, it's how you're fighting. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for being on, Karin.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks. So we are recording this on we're recording this the night before it's coming out, March the 12th. And I just want to let people know that we are 12 days into Whole30. And that it's just been very tough. And it's been an emotional experience.
Yeah.
And much like our experience in watching this movie, there's been a lot of tears as we've been going through the Whole30 journey.
Yeah. We also, some more context in why this is important is that we just got done prepping our lunch for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's 11 o'clock at night. So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
So everyone knows.
But lunch is going to be great.
Yeah, it is.
Or at least that's what we're going to tell ourselves as we're eating it.
This is so good.
We don't have to use salt in the food because our tears will take care of that as we're
It hasn't been that bad, though.
It hasn't been that bad.
No.
You're right.
We feel really good.
It's been a moderate amount of bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the fact that we're already dreaming of what we're going to eat when we're off of it is indicative that man was not meant to Whole30 alone.
That's very true.
But, I'm sure not everyone listened to this podcast to hear about our experience on Whole30. I mean, most of them did.
Most of them did,
yeah,
probably.
But not all of them. So
for those of you who didn't.
Yeah. So what you watched the movie, you listened to the episode. What did you think?
I thought both were great. don't know if I mean, is there ever going to be a time where I come on this and say they were terrible?
Well, I
Both
don't
of
know.
them.
You tell me. I mean,
No, I mean, they're all great. Although I will say, I mean, I think for most of the movies so far, you have expressed that, like, even if you didn't like the movie right after watching, by the time you have talked to the other person about it, that you like it and, like, even want to buy it. And I usually feel the same after listening to the episode, but with this one, I don't.
Really?
I still don't think that I want to buy it. I'm so sorry.
well, tell me more about why, though.
I just think that I don't know if I have a good answer. I think all of the relationships make me sad. They all seem like chaotic and not I mean, I don't like saying like not healthy. I don't know why I don't want to use that here, but like none of the
They're
relationships.
fictional characters. They won't be hurt by your comments.
No, I don't mean that, but I just mean like it's similar to what we talked about last week. Like there's never going to be an actual real 100% perfect healthy relationship. Like everybody has unhealth in them. So that's what I mean. Like I don't want to be like, "Oh, they're unhealthy, so I don't like them." It's just more that like watching the characters interact isn't enjoyable for me because it's almost like stressful for me because emotionally I feel like I don't know how any of them exist as a person in the chaos that is their relationships.
Do you think that any of it was what Karin and I were talking about, where, you know, because this is the oldest movie that we've done, because it came out in '83, like I wonder how much of that is because there isn't really a central plot traveling through the movie. It's more of like a character study where they just kind of define who the characters are, put them in the same room, and let them go.
Yeah, maybe. It may be. And like you're following this. We watched something else recently that was like that, where you followed a character more than you followed a storyline. So it's not that I always dislike those, because I think I have liked movies like that, but I don't know. This one I just didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't. I know that you guys talked about a lot of growth, and I did see growth in the characters at the end, but I didn't find myself rooting for them in the way that I like to root for characters. I feel terrible saying this.
Well, I saw growth in Shirley MacLaine's character, but I think maybe
too.
she might be the only one. Maybe Jack Nicholson's character too.
Yeah, a little bit. But him, I don't feel like I really was rooting for him, more so that like it was more that I wanted him to be a certain way for her.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't anything about his character that I was like, oh, I really want him to grow in this way.
Yeah.
I didn't even plan on talking about all of that, but it's true.
Cool.
That's where I'm at.
Where else are you?
Well, some other things that I kind of picked out from you guys talking, first of all, was in talking about Karin's story, like kind of how she got into therapy, which I just loved. Like I loved you guys talking about her walking forward and continuing to walk forward, which you guys talked more about, so I don't need to talk more about it. I just loved it. And at the end of kind of her saying all of that, you guys had a little conversation about people who go into the field of therapy, but like without having been to therapy themselves. And we've talked about that before, you and I have, and I think in the podcast you said just sometimes you have a hard time understanding that, just because for you it was so impactful that you feel like it was a gift for you and you want to give it back to others, which is like one of my favorite things about you and one of the things I love the most about you. But I just thought it'd be worth clarifying that if you go into the field of therapy or any helping profession for that matter without having been on the other side, it doesn't necessarily, I just want to say that like I don't think that makes your journey or your desire to be in that field less valid at all. I mean, I think I agree that it's a really worthwhile and valuable experience to be on the other side. And I think it's helpful, and like there's some stuff about self-care that I believe there, but yeah, I think it's definitely, it's perfectly reasonable that you could have this drive and desire within yourself to go into that field just because of how you were born. Like you maybe just have a heart for it, even though you haven't been on the other side. So I just thought that would be worth saying to people.
And I think I mean, where I was coming from with that wasn't necessarily you needed to have, oh, there we go. Our dinner's done. Sure. So I think what I was trying to say wasn't necessarily that you had to have some issue that took you to therapy, but I think what I was trying to get across was more along the lines of to know what the experience of being on the couch is, to know what your client may be thinking or feeling in their experience and sitting there for the first time would be helpful, to know the structure of therapy, like all those kinds of things. I don't think that regardless of your upbringing or your experience that anything would disqualify you. So I think if somebody has it in their heart to help people, I say go for it.
Yeah. And then I think the last thing I can think of is just that end scene where Emma is dying and she's talking to Flap about him getting the kids. I think she like asks him if he wants them or whatever it is. And you guys talked about it. And Karin pointed out that he had this smile that reminded her of a kid getting away with something. And that just, I don't know why that just stood out to me so much. And I didn't see that in the movie. Like I didn't pick up on that, but I think she's so right. And I think like in that scene and in that moment, Emma was almost giving him like a pass. Like it's okay if you don't live up to your commitments or expectations or something. Which I think, and she mentioned this too, and I think I said this after we watched the movie, that I just wondered how much of the way they were portrayed was because this movie was made in the early 80s or whenever it was, just because roles were so different, or at least were portrayed differently in media. And so, and it's also a really clear picture of why those roles aren't sustainable and functioning for a good marriage and things like that. Yeah, that whole scene was just, I mean, it was heartbreaking and confusing for him to not want his kids, but I thought that her take on it and that he was getting away with something and she was letting him, I just thought that was such a good perspective on that scene.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember saying while we were watching it or after that the thing that got me so much was that neither of their faces, their facial expressions were matching the words and the tone of what they were saying, which goes to that kind of, I'm getting away with something smile that Karin talked about. And then also just I had so much trouble not projecting myself into that. And even before we started recording, just again, saying to you, I just cannot fathom him not wanting his kids. Like I just can't, I can't even begin to understand that.
Yeah, I think he was just so emotionally absent though.
Yeah. There's something in relationships called emotional tone. It's the want to in a relationship. And if a couple comes to therapy and they are presenting with whatever the issue is, if the emotional tone's there, if the want to is there, if both of them still say, I really want this and I want to make it work, then anything's possible. But as soon as one of them, even just one, has determined, I don't want this anymore, it's nearly impossible to bring it back to life. And it seemed like in that scene, it was kind of the closing chapter, literally, of what happens when emotional tone almost completely leaves a relationship. Because I think at that point it just seemed like neither one of them wanted the relationship.
Yeah.
And I think what I was seeing in that scene that made it so tough for me was it seemed like Flap was saying that he didn't even want the relationship with the kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's always going to be something that's tough for me to see, and it's always going to be tough for me to understand. And yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that scene might have been the toughest for me in the whole movie.
Yeah, I think so. That was definitely the one that I think we talked about the most.
Yeah. Did you have anything else?
No, that was it. It was so
Alright.
great.
Yeah?
Yeah, I love all of this.
So, rent, buy, or pass?
Ooh, for me, it's pass.
Pass?
Rent.
You wouldn't even say rent.
Sorry. Yes. No, I would tell people to rent it.
Okay.
Worth a watch,
Okay.
not a buy.
Okay.
For me.
For you. Which is the person I asked the question to.
I know, but I'm sorry. I just don't. I feel Karin said it was like one of her favorite movies, and I
Yeah.
love that, and it should be.
Absolutely. But I'm asking you.
I know.
And I promise you that Karin wouldn't have her identity attached to the movie either.
Okay.
Sweet. Well, I mean, I think that 11:33 p.m. is a good time to bring the lights back up and say, at least for this episode, that the theater is closed.